समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Elegant as ever in a conservatively tailored business suit and rimless eyeglasses, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency briefly removed his pipe from his mouth to deliver his verdict. The best intelligence coup since the Korean War. The blood-stained blue satchel Alan Dulles held up had traveled thousands of kilometers on foot from Tibet into Nepal and India, and then on board a special CIA aircraft. The 1600 pages of classified documents recovered in a November 1961 ambush by Tibetan insurgents showed that Chairman Mao Zedong's great leap forward had plunged China into desperate famine and social chaos. There was also evidence of genocide. From March 1959 to September 1960, the Blue Satchel documents revealed that the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, had killed more than 87,000 Tibetans, even as it sought to assert Chinese sovereignty over the region. Last week, almost 7 decades after he escaped the PLA and entered India in 1959, Tenzin Gyatso, the Dalai Lama, laid out a map for his succession. The Garden Phodrang Trust, which once ruled Tibet as a political body and now manages the personal affairs of the Dalai Lama, will seek his reincarnation in consultation with all the 4 major schools of Tibetan Buddhism. The choice of a reincarnation will mark a decisive moment in Tibet's troubled relationship with China. From teetering on the edge of survival in 1960, the Chinese state has become a global hegemon, with its control of Tibet now beyond question. The government of China has long insisted that the new Dalai Lama can only be chosen by drawing lots from a golden urn which is held at the Jokhang temple in Lhasa, following a king imperial ritual dating back to 1792. There's little doubt what Beijing will do if the successor to the Dalai Lama is chosen from within Tibet. Gedhun Choke Nima, a 6-year-old identified by the Dalai Lama as the reincarnation of the Panchen Lama, has simply disappeared. The People's Republic has no intention of allowing India or the West, or in fact even the Dalai Lama, to influence its Tibet policy. Figures make one more piece of bad news very clear. The Tibetan diaspora in South Asia, particularly India and Nepal, is aging and in decline. 3 factors, scholar Tenzin Dorji and Sevang Rigzin argue, have brought this about. First, the PLA has made using the mountain passes to leave Tibet into Nepal increasingly dangerous. In 2006, the PLA opened fire on a group of Tibetans, including children, crossing the Nangpa La Pass into Nepal, killing several. The threat of force, coupled with heightened digital surveillance, has slowly choked off refugee flows. Larger factors, Dorji and Rigzin argue, are also at play. Liberal immigration quotas in the United States, Canada, Australia, and France have allowed thousands of young Tibetans living in India to build new lives in the West. Meanwhile, Tibetans in India face restrictions on buying property, obtaining business licenses, and until 2014, when they became eligible to apply for citizenship, even had trouble voting in elections. Finally, like all other communities with high levels of educational attainment, Tibetans in India have a low birth rate. Economic opportunities, meanwhile, have drawn large numbers of ethnic Han and Hui migrants into the Tibetan Autonomous Region, or TAR, where they are now estimated to make up 15% or more of the population of 3.2 million people. The Han, scholar Sultim Zangmo writes, have been drawn to the TAR by relatively high incomes, the availability of land, and private sector opportunities. Many small businesses, shops, and restaurants in urban areas are owned by Han, Zhangmo notes. There's no shortage of evidence that the cultural changes resulting from these policies have angered many Tibetans. The flight of two high profile lamas considered pro establishment, Arjia Lobsang Thubten from the Kumbh monastery in 1998 and the Karmapa from Surfu near Lhasa in 2000, shows that discontent runs deep, at least among the clerical class. Even though the TAR periodically faces large scale protests, as in 1998 and 2008, Beijing, however, remains confident that its economic policies are creating a Tibetan elite that fundamentally sees itself as Chinese. The government has set up a system of Tibetan oriented lower middle schools for Tibetans living elsewhere in China. At the same time, it has scrapped plans for greater cultural autonomy within the TAR, abandoning efforts to grant Tibetan official status or require Han officials to learn the Tibetan language. From the Chinese government's point of view, limiting autonomy and ensuring economic growth are the twin pillars necessary to avoid the fate of the Soviet Union. And history helps us understand why this gamble might just work. For generations, India has seen Tibet through incense-tinted lenses as a kind of Shangri-La land punctuated by exotic palaces, prayer wheels, and colorful flags. Like many other feudal states in Asia, though, Lamaist Tibet was also a place of savage inequality and violence. Although there has been an ideologically charged scholarly debate on the scale and conditions of Tibet's peasantry before 1959, historians like Mervyn Goldstein have shown that hereditary serfdom was widespread. With much of the land held by monasteries and aristocrats, the single monastery of ThePrint, political scientist Michael Parenti has written, was one of the world's largest landowners with 185 manors, 25,000 serfs, 300 great pastures, and 16,000 herders. Since monastic leaders were often the children, the scions of aristocratic families, the wealth was pretty concentrated. Even though Tibetan Buddhism rejected the death penalty on theological grounds, severe punishments were common. All over Tibet, wrote Robert Ford, once the British radio operator in Lhasa, people, I quote, had been deprived of an arm or a leg for theft. These amputations, he reported, were carried out without antiseptics or sterile dressings. For stealing 2 sheep from a monastery, Sering Wang Tuchi told the traveller Stuart and Roma Gelder, his eyes were ordered removed, one gouged with a knife, the other pulled whole from its socket with a half-hollowed ball. To complete the torture, 2 of his fingers were amputated. Even though these accounts might be tainted by ideological bias, the pro-communist Gelders, for example, infamously failed to see the catastrophic fallout of the 1960 famine in Tibet. We have many similar accounts dating back to the 19th century. American-educated Tashi Sering, who returned to Tibet in 1963 only to spend years in prison during the Cultural Revolution, has also recounted how sexual violence against young boys was institutionalized in the monastery system where he studied as a child. All of this, along with the PLA's early efforts to build schools and roads, led some modernizing Tibetans to support China in the early years of the occupation. Following the incorporation of Tibet into China in 1951, policymakers in Beijing debated just how to deal with the new region. In 1955 and 1956, efforts to curb monastic power led to rebellions in the Kham region, culminating with the PLA bombing several monasteries. Mao believed the time wasn't ripe for enforcing socialism and counseled patience. Fan Ming, the party's head for the TAR, argued against holding back. He believed a delay would allow pro-independence forces to consolidate and pushed for PLA deployment across the region. Refugees from Kham eventually gathered in Lhasa and formed an irregular army. Their anger exploded into rebellion in 1959, prompting the PLA to step in and begin forcibly confiscating monastery lands. The CIA, now declassified documents reveal, began funding the Kham insurgency later that year. Alongside India and Nepal, the CIA supplied weapons and trained insurgents until 1974. From the outset, however, this Kham insurgency was doomed. Though many Tibetans resented China's assault on their faith and traditions, not all mourned the fall of the rapacious feudal families who had fled with the Dalai Lama in 1959. The Tibetan insurgents generated valuable intelligence for the CIA, expert John Masco has written, but never came close to their stated goal of reversing Chinese control. Lacking a genuine political mass base, the insurgent leadership was further weakened by regional and sectarian divisions. Theocratic institutions which had long governed Tibet had also blocked the build-up of the ideological political foundations needed for a unified national identity. Even after the insurgency collapsed, China recognized that it had a political problem and made repeated attempts to address it. As early as 1979, China opened channels for dialogue with the Dalai Lama through Prince Peter of Denmark, a noted Tibetologist. Party General Secretary Hu Yaobang also reached out to the Dalai Lama and various Tibetan exile groups in 1980. But though several rounds of talks took place, they led nowhere. The Tibetans insisted on genuine autonomy for the kind of freedom they enjoyed in India, while China was willing to concede some cultural space but no significant political rights. Time, it's clear, has proved to be on China's side. Most likely, the new Dalai Lama, the heir to the century-old Lama estate that once ruled Tibet with the prayer bead and the sword, will reign over a nation that now exists only in the imagination, scattered in the minds of a diaspora that stretches across the world. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.